Amid massive protests in Hong Kong with regards to two controversial bills, two controversial legislations, that is one, the National Anthem Bill that is being debated and discussed today, and the national security legislation which was proposed by the National People's Congress in Beijing, circumventing the Hong Kong legislature, has really put the people of Hong Kong in a tough spot. I'm being joined by a very senior pro-democracy legislator from Hong Kong, Claudia Mo, also known as Claudia Bowring. Many thanks for joining us here on India Today, Ms. Bowring. A very severe, when it comes to cases or legislations that we're looking at, a very severe one at that, which could in many ways hamper Hong Kong's democracy. What do you have to say with the manner in which these bills and these laws are being brought in?
Now, one thing I need to make it very clear, and that is, yes, we are debating, quote and unquote, the national anthem law. But the national security law, as you perfectly suggested, bypassed the local legislature. It bypasses all our legislative procedures in Hong Kong, meaning the legislature here just wouldn't have a chance to actually look at it, let alone debating it. And the national security law is 10 times worse, if not more, than the anthem law, because the security thing would encompass practically every bit of dissent activities in Hong Kong, and anything that's considered politically undesirable, incorrect, they just might be able to drum up charges against you, charges like subversion, separatism, and terrorism, or collusion with foreign agents.
Right. Which is why it brings me to the protests that are happening. We saw the protests last time around. Last year I was there, and the protests were massive. Somewhere down the line, there was a bit of convincing that people could do in ensuring that the extradition bill that was trying to be introduced back then was removed and withdrawn. Do you see any such movement with the protests that we are witnessing this time around as well?
I doubt that this time our protests would work at all, because Beijing looks very determined to just push through this national security law. And when it comes to the anthem law, the Democrats are very much a minority at the legislature. We're horribly outnumbered, so it's going to get the passage. And so taking to the street to protest might not be a sustainable way of doing it. But then the young are very determined and adamant. They think, we fight, we may not get what we want, but if we don't fight, we definitely won't get what we want or need. And so we just have to carry on. And so protests are still continuing in the streets of Hong Kong today. It's heartbreaking. I mean, the scenes, the news footage, they're all heartbreaking, depressing, and distressing. But then Hong Kong people are still fighting on.
Claudia Mo, are you seeing the manner in which the cops and the authorities are handling the protests this time around a little more harsher than last time?
The Hong Kong police have been the same, basically. I mean, police brutality in this town has become almost world famous. I mean, they not only use unnecessarily excessive force, they actually conducted brutality in many cases. They were caught on tape very often, and now they got the backing, obviously, not just the Hong Kong government, but also of Beijing, the big boss. So the Hong Kong police literally has turned Hong Kong into a police state, and they're trying to frighten our protesters away, that, in the middle of this pandemic, you should all be staying home. You don't go out to the street, let alone protesting. This is just not right, and so on. But the young just wouldn't listen, the young in particular. Of course, we have many older protesters. And so They're trying to shut down Hong Kong. This is the end of Hong Kong as we know. By that I mean that Hong Kong will exist still physically, we're still here, but they're trying to cut off our soul being all the universal values we've been embracing, like human rights, rule of law, democracy, etc. No, that's what they find as the gaping holes in their version, the Beijing version of the Hong Kong story, and that is, oh, under one country, two systems, Hong Kongers actually could enjoy quite a bit of rights and freedoms to
That's
protest,
right.
to rally, right? And so they want to plug these loopholes as such.
Well, when it comes to these two legislations, you're saying that the pro-democracy legislators are absolutely outnumbered. So, where does the future stand, Claudia Mo? Where does it stand? We'll see. Will we see the second reading go through successfully and the national anthem bill be passed? Will we also see the national security legislation go through the Hong Kong legislature only as procedural because Beijing wants it, and a different Hong Kong altogether?
Those two pieces of legislation will get the passage as they're supposed to be. I mean, you know, the the national security law is actually considered by some of our legal experts in Hong Kong as technically unconstitutional. But it doesn't matter because Beijing itself is the constitution. And so that's it. But what are we going to do? We will have a legislative election in September, and we have this goal for a legislative majority by then. And that's also one of the key reasons for Beijing to try to rush through this national security law, because it will have this frightening, intimidating effect on the democracy movement in Hong Kong.
Well, understandably so. Now, role of Carrie Lam. Do you think, as a Hong Konger, Carrie Lam has done more injustice to the people of Hong Kong by siding with anti-democracy legislations, be it the extradition bill last year or these two critical pieces of legislation this year? And how do you think Beijing is going to explain the 42-year deal agreement that it has violated?
Now, Carrie Lam, at the start of her tenure, she actually told the foreign press loud and clear that she's no puppet of Beijing, but increasingly Hong Kong people now sees her as exactly what she says she is not. And why is that the case? Well, you cited all those basically the key examples, right? She has not just sided with Beijing, she's been doing everything in Hong Kong at the behest, at the order of her Beijing boss. She doesn't seem to have fought for Hong Kongers in any way. So she's let down Hong Kong people, basically.
Claudia Mo, what is the future lie for Hong Kong when it comes to the legislations being passed, even if there are elections? Do you see pro-democracy legislators or the parties really perform well to bring Hong Kong back to its older space, which is what it is right now, and revoke the legislations that have been put in place?
That we can't possibly revoke what's been passed, I should think. But then we are hoping that we will indeed get our legislative majority, and at least we still will have some say in the governance of Hong Kong, that the Hong Kong government wouldn't just be behaving like a little branch of the central authorities in Beijing, because we do have our own problems, we do have our own concerns, and we do supposedly have this one country, two systems, which is they should have protected and guaranteed our basic rights and freedoms, and now it's been shattered apart, and this is just not right. So we are hoping that the September elections would prove that we do have Hong Kong people's support.
And finally, before I let you go, now there are a lot of allegations. Yesterday, President Xi Jinping in his address very clearly said that that Beijing should be prepared for war. And when he says that, we know that while he's not naming any country and it's ambiguous, he's had problems with India as well. We are having border problems as well with China. It could be any country, but he directs it primarily to Hong Kong and to Taiwan to ensure that the message goes out loud and clear. At a time when he also says that there are external forces influencing pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, that there is involvement of America.
Yeah, well, it's obvious by now that everyone could see the Hong Kong is being used as a pawn, sort of a diplomatic icon in the Sino-US relationship. I don't know, we're supposed to be proud of that, but then it is what it is, and what will come out of it, we will see. I mean, international relationships are much more complicated when it comes to you can't just look at international relations from the Hong Kong perspective, right? But then I hope we won't become too huge a collateral damage. And I thank you for this interview very much. I have to go.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us here in India today, Claudia Mo. Indeed a pleasure. Hoping that you get your majority in Hong Kong and ensure that the voices of the people are heard. Thank you so much for joining us here in India today.
Thank you.